Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Josh Blunt, and welcome to the next part in our series of 7 means of achieving depth in a drawing. Now, today we are going to be talking about one that is incredibly useful if you're doing things like landscape drawings. And this one that we're going to be talking about today is atmospheric perspective. So, atmospheric perspective is basically how the opacity of a specific thing gets less and less as it goes into the distance, kind of almost as if there's like fog or mist or things like that in the way. Just the farther it gets away, the less of it you'll actually be able to see. So, to show this, we're just going to quickly draw a little scene. It'll be kind of a forest scene. We're just going to draw some trees. They're not going to have any leaves on them or anything fancy like that. We're just going to draw just the bare trees. So to start out, we're going to put our opacity a little bit higher on this one. And so we're just going to start with our tree. It'll be nice and big. Just also kind of combining last lesson the size and also the plane of that we're using. I'm putting it kind of just on the lower right. I'm using a lot of strokes just to make sure that it gets a little bit more of a darker color to it, because that's the entire point of atmospheric perspective. It'll get lighter and lighter as the things go further and further away. We'll just quickly draw a couple of branches and kind of shade them, well, not shade them, just get them to be a bit bolder and a bit denser. That way we get a nice, bold looking kind of tree thing. It's not supposed to be beautiful, it's just supposed to get the point across. So I hope that's working. So there we go. That's kind of our basic tree. Now we're going to move on, and I want to put a tree just a little bit behind it on the other side of the page. So we'll turn our opacity just a tiny bit down. We won't use as many brush strokes on this one. We're going to make it a little bit smaller because that also can just add a little bit more depth. We can tell that it's a little bit more in the background. And so, this tree, there are some places that are just as dark, but for the grand majority of them, they're a little bit lighter. And so, as you can see, that adds just a little bit more of an effect of it being a bit more in the background, which is quite a nice effect. I like it. I want to make that branch a little bit more distinct so that it looks more like a branch than just a bundle of whatever. Yeah, that works. Okay, so there's our second tree. For a third tree, we'll make this kind of a skinnier tree with a few more branches. Now I'm using a lot less brush strokes. It will be a bit kind of darker around the trunk because that's where it's thicker. But now you can really start to see how the tree on the right is popping a little bit. You can really tell that it is the tree that's in front of the others. So now just going along, they're going to get a little bit faster. We'll just quickly add a tree here. Even less brush strokes used. Maybe we'll kind of add a few kind of just lime trees to the background. We'll turn the opacity even farther down just to kind of make it kind of even less noticeable, almost. And see, that's starting to have a little bit of effect. We'll give some of them kind of a couple branches. We'll bold a couple of them out a little bit just to make it seem more like a forest and have the trees a bit more evenly spaced. And so, as you can see, just using this quick opacity trick, you can already start to see a little bit of what I'm meaning. All of these trees, if you differ the opacities on them, differ how bold and their shades are, it's very, very easy to just be able to tell which trees are in front and which trees are back in the foreground. We'll make a little bit of a bolder tree right here. And that is awesome. So we'll just add a little bit of kind of ground here just to kind of make the image a bit better, I suppose. It just makes it seem a bit more realistic. Oops. Let's not go into brush settings right now. That's not what I need. And so there we go. And so there we are. Just using a little bit of atmospheric perspective, we are able to show that a tree is very clearly in front of the rest of the trees, and that going further back, you can see kind of where the trees are, and you can kind of tell that that's what they're supposed to be in a way. But in the end, it's just that slight change in opacity as you're going back, the slight change in size, change in boldness, a little bit of overlapping. Like, notice that this big dark tree is overlapping some of the smaller, less bold trees in the background. And so that is just showing how combining all of these different techniques is really, really useful. And it just makes the depth even more powerful in your image. And so atmospheric perspective is a great one if you're doing a little scene like this. Of course, you'd want it to be a little bit more polished for a finished copy, but really it's not that bad. So yeah, atmospheric perspective, very, very useful for landscapes. It can be useful if you're drawing people walking across a street, or if you're just drawing a street in general. The further it goes down the street, the more and more not transparent, but the less and less bold things will see. Like colors, they'll jump out at you if they're very close, but further away in an image, you'd make the colors duller. You'd make the lines less crisp, and just, yeah. We'll talk a bit more about stuff like detail fading away later. And so, yeah, that is how atmospheric perspective adds a lot of depth to your drawing. So, I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial, and comment if you want me to do any different tutorials in the future. I'm open to suggestions. So, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next tutorial.